sector leaders regarding how to engage on social media, if at all. One mistake can cause huge reputational damage and even cost careers. But the potential benefits in terms of reaching key audiences and key stakeholders directly are so significant that we really must give it serious consideration and assessment. So I'm delighted this morning to welcome Wayne Denner, Northern Ireland's leading technology behavioural specialist. Wayne is going to walk us through the big issues this morning in relation to social media. What are the big platforms and their pros and cons? How to figure out which one is right for you and your organisation. How you need to resource your digital presence and how you can assess if your digital presence is effective. So as always, this morning we'll have the opportunity to discuss the presentation at the end. And please feel free to feed in any questions or comments you have on the chat function on Zoom as we go through the presentation. Wayne will be providing a cheat sheet at the end, summarising all the tips that he'll be bringing us, and he will tailor it after the session to pick up on the detail of any specific questions or queries that are raised. Again, we will be recording today's session and we'll place it on the CEF website later today. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Wayne to get us kicked off.
Good morning. Thank you kindly, Anne, for the very nice introduction. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you guys this morning, and I suppose share my insight and my thoughts over the past 25 years in this space, using social media for my own business, but also working for the brands and organizations and helping individuals along the way really maximize how to get the most out of technology and social media. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions as we move through the presentation this morning. And please feel free, as Anne already mentioned, to pop those questions in the chat box, because I do have a cheat sheet coming later on today for you guys, which is going to sort of summarize all the tips, things that you can take a look at. And there will be some practical things for you guys to do after today's session. And that's really important. I don't just want this to be a sort of an information session. I want you guys to take the information away and go and do some of the practical aspects of what we're going to cover this morning and into the afternoon. So again, any questions on stuff that I touch on, if you want a little bit more further clarity, if you don't want to post that question publicly in the chat, please feel free to reach out and you'll get my email address at the end. If there is any questions or concerns or anything that I can help you with when it comes to this wonderful world of technology and social media that I absolutely love, but it comes with its own sort of risks and things that we need to be aware of. But also we're looking for more smarter ways that we can use it more effectively in the COVID-19 world that we live in now. It's a great way to get our message out there. It's a great way to connect with people. It's a great way to control the narrative. It's a great way to become our own media channel for our organization. And I suppose that's one of the huge things that social media platforms provide. You can become your own media channel by using it effectively. So we're going to look at ways that we can do that. And as already mentioned, what are some of the platforms that might be more relevant for you within your organization? Do you need to spend your time on every platform? Or is there a specific platform that may be more relevant for you, that may help you reach your target audience more effectively? So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're going to cover. There's going to be a little bit more in there, of course, as we add more value. So any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat window. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys now, and hopefully everybody will be able to see this colorful presentation that we have popping up on screen. It's been a dull 2 days here in Warrenpoint. It's nice to have a little bit of brightness. And I think this is our virtual dose of vitamin D with my nice colorful slides. So we're going to pop onto the full screen. So I'm going to get a thumbs up from Anne if she can see that for me. Perfect. Excellent. So today's presentation is very much called Blended Reputation. And that's really sort of the title for today, because we're spending more and more time online. And we all know that reputation is so important, and it's something that we must manage and we must protect. But our reputation can be impacted by what we're posting and what we're sharing in the virtual spaces. So this is sort of going to look at how we sort of manage that more effectively as well, but also how we protect it within our organization and some of the things that we can do when it comes to managing our online reputation. So for those of you who have never come across me before, there's about 19 pages of Google search results on the internet currently. If you want to jump over there later on and sort of do a little bit of digging around and searching and kind of find some of the stuff that I've been up to over the past couple of years, that's all there, publicly documented on the World Wide Web. So again, that's sort of me highlighting to you guys that I'm very much aware of what my digital footprint looks like. And I spend a little bit of time sort of combing through the search engine results to be aware of what's out there about me in terms of my digital DNA, but also what's out there about my business and my brand and my organization. So that's sort of one part of what we're going to talk about. So I've been immersed in this space now for about 25 years. I've been working lots in digital communications specifically. One of my early claim to fame was I set up one of the very early social networking websites in Ireland and grew it to a user base of 83,000 registered users. And it was a website called Out Last Night. And this was a precursor to Bebo and MySpace, which many of us in the room today will remember and may have even been users of Bebo in the past. So this website was very much set up pre those platforms, and it was more of a localized social networking website. But back then, of course, the internet was a different place. But over the 3 to 4 years that I was running that particular website, I did learn a lot about how the internet and technology was fast changing, and more people were starting to go online and create their digital footprint. If we fast forward to 2008, I received a connection request from a local principal in a school who was concerned about some of the things that were happening in the online space when it comes to children and young people. And she asked me, Wayne, could you come in and could you deliver a workshop to our students and our parents about what they need to think about when it comes to the internet mostly, but also social media, which was starting to become a thing. So that got me interested in the online spaces from a behavioral point of view, and really looking at the impact of cyber safety, looking at the impact of cyber abuse, and also looking at the impact of cybercrime. So for the past sort of 10 to 15 years, I've devoted a lot of my time really educating people. And I've become an educator of sorts, where I create a lot of free content for parents when it comes to how to help keep their children and young people safer in the online space. I've become a parent myself over the past 10 years. So that's given me an insight as well on how children and young people are using the internet. And I also spend a lot of my time delivering workshops in schools to children and young people right across the UK and Ireland on how to be safe online. So I kind of see it from both perspectives. I see it from an adult's perspective, which I am, but I also see it from the young person's perspective and sort of the risks and the dangers that exist for young people when it comes to the online space. So if you are a parent that's watching the workshop today and you'd like to know more information about keeping your children and young people safer online, please do drop by my website. Lots of free resources available over there when it comes to safeguarding and the online space in general. A few other sort of bits and pieces before we move on. I wrote a book back in 2008, which we're rolling out a second edition now in 2021 called The Student's Guide to an Epic Online Reputation. And really that was all about how to manage your online reputation and how to get the most out of the internet and social media. And it was mainly written for children and young people, but there has been a lot of adults who have found the book really useful when it comes to managing their own professional reputation as well. And we're going to touch on some of those elements in our workshop today about how to best protect and manage your online reputation. I also run a podcast called the Zero Lives Left podcast over on iTunes. And I talk a lot about different aspects of entrepreneurship, business, digital marketing, social media, and a whole host of other things in the enterprise space, you're welcome to take a look at that as well. And more recently, co-founder of a learning and development platform called CoBabble, which we started to develop about 2 years ago. It's ironic how things happen, but we were building this platform with the intent of being able to deliver training virtually to delegates' smartphone devices. And it was something that we worked on for about 2 years. And in February of this year, we just brought it out of beta testing, and COVID-19 suddenly struck. And now a number of businesses are actually using that platform, as am I using that platform as a way to make my online safety content available to parents through a handy smartphone app. And then finally, I do a lot of stuff through many of the local media outlets, U105, I write for Huffington Post. I also do some stuff for the BBC. Whenever things crop up in and around the online safety space, I'm a regular media commentator. So that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of sort of my background and my bio and kind of some of the things that I've been up to. I have been delivering training now for over 10 years in the public and private sector. And I do work a lot with the public and private sector, especially in the online space where I work with social workers and law enforcement on aspects of online safety. So that's me. What are we going to talk about today in our fun workshop? What's coming up? And Anne sort of already gave a nice little sort of snapshot on what we're going to cover. I'm not going to go through those points again, but on screen, you'll sort of see a little bit and get a little bit of a flavor of what's coming up. Really, the focus of this workshop will be on you and your organization and how you can get the most out of social media, and also some of the things to think about and the platforms to be on the lookout for, and also some of those practical tips then that you can take away and check out after today's workshop. So the first thing for us, I suppose, to keep in mind today, guys, is that we all use social media platforms for different reasons. And I think once we understand that, from a commercial point of view, it becomes a lot easier to think about what platform you should be spending your time on. So if we think of our Facebook page, and many of us have Facebook pages that we use to keep in touch with our family and friends, and that's more of a personal or a personalized community in the sense. When we think of other platforms like LinkedIn, for example, we start to think of the professional aspect of that platform, how it's more a networking platform, a professional development platform, and therefore the content that we're uploading to LinkedIn would be different to the content that we're uploading to our Facebook page, for example, because it's a different audience. So understanding our audience is really important when it comes to social media, and the people that we're trying to reach is also important. So when we think of platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, I work with a couple of organizations at the moment that are using TikTok as their platform for communicating with their audience, because the messages that they're trying to get out to their target audience are very much youth focused. So that platform makes sense for them to be using as an organization because their target audience is youth. So platforms will also have a little bit of a B2B and a B2C crossover, and we'll explore that a little bit more as we move through our sessions. But I'll keep in mind that we're going to be using these platforms for different reasons, and there'll be different outputs that we're looking to get as a result of the time that we're spending on the platform. When it comes to our reputation, there's no doubt that the more content that we post online, the greater impact it can have on our reputation. The more time we spend online, the greater the likelihood that we could post something or somebody else could post something that could impact our organizational reputation or our personal reputation. And we also have to keep that at the back of our mind as we're using social media platforms. And there has been many times where I have almost got sucked into things on social media because I got emotionally involved. Maybe something was said that maybe I had a passionate opinion about or a view on, and it's very easy to get pulled in and sucked into those conversations. So it is important to stop and think before you post and you share anything online. And that's a message that I always echo in my workshops. Stop, think, and post. Really important, 3 simple words, but they have saved me at so many times because I've almost went into a conversation and I've stopped and I've thought about it a little bit. So as Warren Buffett says, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and only 5 minutes to ruin it. And I think this quote is brilliant. And I've adapted this quote slightly for my workshops. And instead of the 5 minutes, it's now 30 seconds, or it's 10 seconds, or it's 5 seconds. Because as we've seen recently, and I've seen this in the past couple of days in the media, and even in our local media, when I talk about media, I'm referring to social media. I've seen people post things online who've had to roll back on that. And even though they've went back and they've deleted the content is still out there effectively because somebody has screenshotted it and somebody has shared it somewhere else online. So people are very quick to screenshot, to capture that. And then even if you were to try and roll back on it, it's somewhere else out there. So I think the best thing to do is to always give it some serious thought, particularly if it's something that's likely there's going to be some pushback or there's going to be some debate opens up on it. It's better to maybe cross-check that with one or two people before that post goes out online. It's maybe better to write it in a notepad and go for a walk, which sometimes I've done. I've written up my tweet in my notes, and I've left it there and I've went for a walk around the front shore in Warrenpoint, and I've come back and I've reread it and I've thought, okay, I'm not going to send that now. So again, taking that couple of moments, taking that walk, taking that time offline can really help manage that reputation from preventing something from being posting or shared online in the heat of the moment, so to speak. And that's something that we see quite a bit, and I see quite a bit from an online reputational management point of view, where things can go wrong. So always keep that at the back of your mind whenever you're posting or you're sharing things online, because the reach of all of this is huge. And social media helps you reach and engage with your audience. Locally here in Northern Ireland, absolutely. The percentage of people using social media now is very high. Now more than ever, people are spending more of their time online, looking for information, searching online. We have the media that's spending a lot of time online as well, journalists who are looking for stories. And it's well known that they do spend a lot of time on Twitter in particular, looking at trending topics, looking at key figures in Northern Ireland, looking at key organisations in Northern Ireland, and seeing what narrative has been pushed out by A, the organisation, but also B, employees within that organisation. And sometimes it might be a disgruntled employee that flags a tweet up to a media outlet or to another organisation in relation to something that's happening internally. So there is an aspect here of, whilst we're considering using this for our organization, the likelihood is that most of our employees, most of our family and friends are on the platforms, are active in the platforms, and are utilizing the platforms on a daily basis. So we want to be thinking from our point of view, how can we get the most out of the social media platforms that we're using? And I'm going to assume, for the purpose of today's workshop, that most people have a social media profile, have maybe had one in the past, maybe have decided to roll back because of some of the concerns and reservations that they might have. And I absolutely know that there are those reservations when it comes to the online space. So what can we think about that's going to maybe help us build our confidence a little bit more and make sure that we have those safeguards in place when we finally move forward with our social media profiles, when we finally roll more social media content out through our organization, so that we're prepared to manage this effectively as we can. The first thing I'm going to say is don't be me. I'm the biggest champion, biggest ambassador for social media. I spend a lot of my time online. I'm creating a lot of content. I'm across a number of platforms for different reasons. And you may have, read stuff online. You may be following social media influencers. You maybe have attended a digital marketing workshop in the past where that person has said, you need to be out there. You need to be pushing your content. You need to be across all of these platforms. The reality of it is I tried that and it nearly burnt me out. Because I was producing so much content, I was spending so much time online that it was difficult to manage. So what I decided to do was roll back and really start to think about what I mentioned at the start. what is the platform that's going to drive the most results for me, that's going to get me the most reach, what's going to build the most engagement, but also help me to get my message in front of the people that need to see that message. So let's take a look really quickly at how fast all of this is moving. And this is a snapshot, which is not good for my blood pressure, is not good for my anxiety, and can be very overwhelming, but it'll show you how quickly all of this is moving, particularly if you're considering starting out and, starting your social media profile from scratch, or getting in there and trying to build a community and build an audience. This can be off-putting when you look at these types of things. So this is a quick snapshot of what's happening online in real time. And we can see how quick the numbers are going up. If we look at the photos being uploaded to Instagram, if we look at the videos being uploaded to YouTube, if we look at the active users on Facebook, these numbers are increasing at a dramatic pace. And this is live stats from the internet that you're going to be able to take a look at later today on your cheat sheet and see how this number has changed. But when you look at this, you think to yourself, gosh, like already there's been, 392,000 tweets sent. How can a little old me possibly get my message in front of people when that is the noise that I have to compete with? And that's a good word for it. There's a lot of noise on social media. So it's really about trying to find a way that you can cut through the noise and you can be creative in your approach. So let's bust some myths right off the starting blocks today. Myth number one, you need to be on all social media platforms. Absolutely not the case. You will be glad to hear. In fact, that's not a good idea to be across all of the social media platforms, because that's also increasing your organizational digital footprint, and it's also increasing your personal digital footprint as well. So you're better to be selective about the platform that you're using and you're going to spend your time on. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So please don't worry. Please don't get overwhelmed. You don't need to be going away, spreading yourself too thin across all of these platforms. Myth number two, you need to have tons of followers. Absolutely not the case. Forget about 100,000 followers on Twitter. You would be well served to have 150 of the right people following you on Twitter than 100,000 of the wrong people following you. So people tend to get caught up in the numbers, in the likes, in the follower ratios, and all of that type of stuff. And the reality of it is, it's very much about growing the right audience. It's about connecting with the right people, because you're focusing on building relationships. If you're just willy-nilly connecting with anybody, then the likelihood is that you're going to start picking up unwanted attention. And that's a message that I echo in schools. It's all about attracting the right attention, not the wrong attention, through social media platforms. Now, I have had my fair share of trolls. I have had my fair share of abuse online, harassment. I have experienced all of that. However, I haven't had it as bad as other people have had it. And that's partly due to the fact that I pay attention to who's following me on the platform. I don't accept connection requests on my personal social media profile from people. I keep the two things very separate. I do have public profiles, but I do pay attention to those people that are following me on a daily basis. And where possible, I reciprocate the follow back if I find that it's a good fit for me and it's a good fit for the organization and the business. And that's always a good way, because what you're doing at that point is you're growing a loyal community. You're building an audience of people who you're connected with and they're connected with you. And in the likelihood of something going wrong, these people actually come to your defense on the social media platform. And many people don't think about that. And it is about having that tribe, having that community who can weigh in and support you as well in the unlikely case of something going wrong on the social media platform. So you don't need to have that large audience. It's better to start off smaller and grow it out, but also paying attention across the platforms that you're on, or the platform, about who these people are, and also even dipping in and having a quick look at their profile. And one of the things that I like to do, particularly on Twitter, is anybody who follows me on Twitter, I like to go back and I like to review their last 10 tweets. That gives me a quick sense of the type of content that they're tweeting and the type of information that they're pushing out on the social media platform. And then I can make a decision then based on that, whether I'm going to follow them back or if there is something there that might make that connection more meaningful. So just something to think about from the aspect of Twitter. Myth number 3, you don't need to respond to social media activity immediately. So, you don't need to be responding to every tweet that you're getting. And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit towards the end of today's workshop about how we manage that negative aspect of social media. If somebody is being a little bit belligerent, if somebody is, verging on harassment, if you've got some trolls to deal with, how do you manage those types of interactions in the online space? But typically, again, not every tweet, not every social media post, not every reply is going to warrant a response. And it certainly doesn't need to happen immediately as well. One of the things that is also useful for, if it's an organizational account, is to highlight in the bio of the profile when tweets will be responded to or when feedback will be given, particularly if it's over the weekend and people are posting messages and they're not expecting that instantaneous response. You've clearly highlighted that, it'll be responded between the hours of 9 and 5, or you're providing an email address then to take that conversation offline as well. So there is another avenue for that person to explore, which is less public on the platform. Myth number 4, social media is a free way to get your message out there. Well, that's a little bit true, but not really that true, because as we all know, this requires an investment on your behalf. This requires time for your organization. This requires further training and further development. And it also requires content to be produced as well and to be pushed through the social media platform. And let's not forget, these platforms would not exist if we weren't furnishing them with content of some description, whether it's videos or, tweets, whether it's posts, whether it's articles that we're uploading. That's the sole reason these platforms exist. It's because of content that's been created by the end user, thus us who are users of the platform. So that does come with a cost. And some people say it's free. Not in my experience, because it does take a lot of time and there is investment on other stuff that we're going to talk about that you may need to look at when it comes to managing your profile online and scheduling your content and being a little bบmore strategic and effective when it comes to pushing out your content on the social media channels. So there is a cost. Ultimately, it's your time, and your argument could be, well, my time could be better spent somewhere else than spending it on the social media platform. And that's where monitoring all of this really makes a difference, because if you can see return on your investment, then you're going to be more likely to do it. And that is the great thing about it. Once you start to monitor this, then there is an option then or opportunity there for you to be able to see what the return on investment is, or the ROI, or as I like to call it, the return on relationship. And that's the great big return for me. It's the relationship that I'm building with the person through the social media, through the digital experience, which is converting into some sort of business opportunity further down the line. And that might not happen right away. That takes time to build, obviously, but that's the sort of end goal. Myth number 5, everyone will love you. That's once we get that, that's a huge one. And that's the thing about social media. Whenever you put yourself out there, whether you create videos on YouTube like I do, you're prone to feedback. You're prone to feedback on your social media content, on your posts, on your articles, and people will feedback. And in some cases, it may not be the feedback that you want. It may not be positive feedback. And that's where, we have to always keep that in mind, that the social media platforms themselves are there's a lot of different type of people on them. There's a lot of different users. There's a lot of people with different opinions and different observations, and people will chirp in. They will comment on things. They will share that, and there will be situations which may arise where on a platform like LinkedIn, even for example, that I had about a year and a half ago, where something that I had posted on the platform, I had received some feedback from a connection, and it wasn't the most positive type of feedback, and it was in relation to a piece of online safety content that I had created. Now, again, how you manage that process is really important. And it is very much about trying to find a way that, you can positively and responsibly handle the feedback, but also you can look for a way, or you can look for an outlet to take the conversation offline. Because the more of that interaction that takes place in the online space, the higher the likelihood that somebody else is going to get involved in it. So what I've always found really useful is to acknowledge, is to respond, and try and find a way to take the conversation offline and continue that conversation, of course, by all means, in a more private space. That could be over the telephone, that could be via email. And I've had to do those things on several occasions throughout my time on the social media platforms. But what I've found works really well is to respond and then look for a way to take that conversation offline. Now, that's difficult if you're dealing with trolls. That's where, other techniques will be more helpful in managing that interaction. But if it is somebody who is generally just feeding back, maybe doesn't agree with the point of view, maybe doesn't agree with the content and sort of the message that was conveyed in the content or what was shared, then, I try to, acknowledge that as quickly as I can and then take that offline. But when we put ourselves out there, not everybody is going to like what we're posting and what we're sharing. I came across this quote recently, and I thought it was interesting because it's really looking at the senior leaders within organizations and really thinking about, the importance of, having that profile online, that, it enables you to not only build your own personal brand, but also become a thought leader within your organization. And if we look at what I've been trying to do over the past number of years, it's become a thought leader in the online space, become a thought leader in the online reputation space. So regardless of what industry, what sector, what organization you represent, as a CEO, as a senior leader within that organization, social media presents a great opportunity for you to become that thought leader. I love nothing more than to hear from public-facing organizations that are telling me what's happening within the organization, because I'm guilty as charged, like a lot of people. I don't really know what's happening within the organization. I don't really know the great news and the great things that are happening. And I think from a social media point of view, I think pushing out good news stories in particular is a great way to showcase the human side of the organization as well. And it lets people see inside the organization a little bit to what's happening, some of the great work that's happening within the organization. And I find that's a great way to build really good, meaningful connections with your audience and showcase the human side of the organization as well. But thinking about it within our senior executives within our organization, right up to the chief executives, how we can champion positive use of social media. And also we can filter that down through our organization so we can lead by example, so that other employees within the organization are aware of how social media should be handled within the organization. And also they can start sharing that content through their network and pushing that message even further. So start simple and start small. And that's the most important message today, is to keep it simple. Don't try to do what everybody else is potentially doing online. Be careful about some of the things that you're seeing pushed out from other organizations that might not be relevant to your organization and getting caught up in trying to produce similar or more of the same. You are unique. Your organization, for the most part, is unique. Look for ways to tell your story, but keep it simple. Find the right platform gives you the right start. And I already mentioned this at the start. It's not a case of being across all of the platforms. It is very much about finding the right platform for you and for your organization. So I want you to start with some very simple questions. Ask yourself, what platform is your target audience on? Are they on Twitter, for example? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Are they on LinkedIn? Is it a case that your organization has a bit of a B2B, business to consumer. So it's more consumer facing, or is it more B2B? And that's where a platform like Twitter, for example, provides a nice little crossover compared to something like Facebook. If we think of Facebook, it's very much B2C for the most part. And I know there's a lot of businesses using it, but most of those businesses are trying to reach customers in terms of a commerce aspect. But Twitter, on the other hand, provides that nice little B2B crossover, B2C crossover, but also acts as a way for you to get your news, your organizational news in front of people, whether that's the media, whether that's your customers, whether that's communities, or whether that's other organizations. Twitter provides that nice little crossover. LinkedIn, on the other hand, is very much of a B2B platform, where it's very much focusing on networking. It's very much focusing on the business aspect of the community. And that's a great way, absolutely, certainly, for senior executives within an organization to be utilizing that platform. What time can you allocate on the platform? Can you commit to checking your social media platform on a regular basis? As a rule of thumb, I like to check social media twice a day. Now, that's not to say that I don't dip in any other time during the day, but typically I like to check it first thing in the morning. And then I like to check it sort of around 7:30 to about 9:30 at night, depending. Those are the two times that I really like to check the platform. Now, that also works for me in terms of pushing out my content, because I realize that most of my audience is active first thing in the morning, and then they're also active in the evening. Now, this may differ if you are trying to reach your stakeholders. Let's say there's community organizations within Northern Ireland that you're looking to connect with and get your message in front of, then that's going to obviously differ. But I'm just looking at it from a personal aspect at the moment, in terms of, as a senior leader within an organization, managing time is really important. And you don't want to get caught into the trap where you're checking it all the time and it's taking you away from other aspects of it. So I like to check mine first thing in the morning, and at 7:30 to 9:30 in the evening. Now, this is backed up on research, by the way, because I use a tool which tells me what the best time is for me to push out my social media content. So it is giving me that analytics back to say, this is when your audience is most active. I'm going to share that tool with you as well on your cheat sheet, so you can take a look at it, where you can connect it with your social media accounts, and you can get an indication on what the best time is for you or your organization to push out your content, because you want to be doing it at a time that your audience is most active and most receptive to your message. What content are you going to post, create, and share? Are you going to repurpose the content that the marketing department is creating, for example? Or are you going to come up with your own content, potentially with the help of the communications team and the marketing team? Are you going to be able to write your own blog posts? Are you going to be able to write your own LinkedIn posts, status updates? What type of content are you going to push out, and what type of content are you going to share? Of course, it needs to be closely aligned with your organizational, but with a slight peppering of some other aspects of maybe some personality included in there, maybe some personal stuff pushed in. And some of the times I do push some personal things through my social media profile, because it does show the human side of me as an individual, some of the things that I'm interested in. But again, that may not be for everybody. So it is about looking at what you most feel comfortable with pushing out through the channels. How will I manage those negative responses, which of course we've touched on already and may crop up? And I would say it's a good idea to have a plan in place for managing any social media kickback, fallout, negativity around that type of stuff. And we've got some simple tips coming up that are going to help with all of that. And do I know how to keep my social media account secure? We live in the time of data breaches happening on average once a month now. What happens if a social media account was to be compromised? And we've already seen a number of accounts already fall victim to account takeovers. The chief executive of Twitter, for example, had his own account compromised. And there's been numerous other examples of where that has happened. So again, keeping your account secure is really important as well. And we're going to look at some tips on that. So just keep in mind that all platforms will require commitment in order to see success and results. It's just not a case of posting once a day and hoping for the best. It's just not a case of, uploading a video and going, right, that's brilliant. That's me done. It's about keeping consistent, and it's about pushing out regular content on a regular basis. And also, don't fall into the trap of scheduling all of your content and automating the process. Social media works really well when there's a human aspect of it, where you can go in and you can interact with somebody. You can share another organization's content. You can, respond to another organization's content and reply to it. You can share it. You can like it. All of those types of things. Those really are important for engagement metrics on the social media platform as well, and shows that you are a socially savvy organization and that you're active on the platform as well. Okay, which platform is right for your organization? Gosh, we could talk about this all day. And again, we could look down at all the organizations who are taking part in the workshop today, and we could find uses for other platforms. But the two that I really want to focus on today is LinkedIn and Twitter, because I personally believe that those are the platforms that's going to probably drive most of the engagement and probably most of the value. Now, that's not to say that Facebook is not relevant and does not have a place here. It does, and I use Facebook. But it's for a specific target audience. And again, understanding your audience is really important. I mostly only use Facebook for targeting parents, for teachers, for carers, because that platform sits very well with that audience. Now, if I'm looking to create awareness around particularly cybersecurity, I'll mostly be pushing that content through LinkedIn, because it's more of a professional development platform. The content in itself will be more tailored to the audience on that platform. So I do tailor my content depending on the platform that I'm pushing it to as well. Twitter as well allows me to have that B2B and B2C crossover, which I've already mentioned. So the two platforms that we're going to touch on today will be LinkedIn and will be Twitter. So it's all about humanizing the organization. So making the organization more human with relatable content. And again, keeping at the back of your mind all the good news that the organization is doing, all the impact that it's having on people. And those are things that can be pushed and can be channeled through the social media platform. It's a great way for you to keep people up to date with what's happening within the organization as well, the type of things that's going on, particularly from a strategic point of view as well, but also from a senior level organization. Like, again, going back to the example of, I listened to a podcast when I used to fly quite a bit on Emirates, and the chief executive of Emirates, Sir Tim Clark, produces his own podcast where he talks about what's happening within the organization. And I find it absolutely fascinating. Now, he doesn't talk about just the airline industry. He talks about other stuff, but it makes it so interesting. The content is so rich in its nature, but also you can build more of a connection with the brand and also with the organization. So here you have a chief executive utilizing audio content and pushing that out through social media so people can listen and they can experience what's happening within the organization. But they can also hear what's happening as well in other organizations that Emirates, for example, is working with. So it provides a very unique insight to the organization. So it's a great way to provide updates and successes of what's happening within the organization. Storytell with video and photos. So again, we all have a smartphone. Mine's on charge, but pull out your smartphone, take a picture, record a short video, push that out through the social media channels. And again, sometimes I find that videos are more effective when instead of writing a tweet, sometimes I'll do a quick video on what that tweet's about. A lot of the times when I'm producing content, whether it's more of a long form piece of content that I want people to go and look at on YouTube, I'll do a short little video for Twitter and I'll push it out through my Twitter channel with a link then back to my website where people can watch that video. And then finally, look for ways to engage with other users' accounts and also their content. I do have a wee asterisk on this. Just be careful that you do have a little bit of an understanding on what type of content that user is pushing out themselves. And that's why I mentioned at the start, it's a good idea to go back through and look at some of the content that they're pushing out themselves. So some tips: be real and authentic. You are you. Don't be me. Don't be somebody else. Be you. That's the great thing about social media now in 2020. We're all using it. It's never been more easier now than to produce a video and pop the camera up and just talk to the camera, talk to your audience, because more and more people are doing that. When I did this and started to produce my own videos 7, 6, 8 years ago, whatever it was, they were clunky. It was difficult for me to do. I didn't have the confidence, but more and more people are doing it now. It's a lot easier to do. And again, look back at, other people, how they've progressed over the years. If you're ever having a bad day, I always say to people, go in and have a look at my very early YouTube videos. They are hilarious. And I've left them up there for one reason and one reason only. It shows progression. Okay. The more you do this, the easier it becomes, and you'll start to find what I call your social media personality. You'll become more relaxed. You'll become more creative. You'll be pushing out a lot more content as well, and you'll be interacting a lot more. And what you'll see is results. You'll see more traffic going to your organizational website. You'll see more people engaging and sharing your content and asking questions. And that's what you want. Those are the types of results that sort of boost the engagement. So where possible, respond and engage. There's nothing worse than social media channels being a one-way communication platform for an organization. Social media works really well when it's two-way, and there's interaction and there's engagement. Ensure that your profile is up to date. Your LinkedIn profile is up to date from a professional point of view. And also your social media account, whether it's Twitter, for example, that you've got your bio filled out, you've got a link to your organization, you've got a snapshot of what it is you're all about and what it is your organization is all about, with a link back to the organizational website. That's a great way to drive traffic to a website, because it's like your business card online. And I get thousands of people who actually look at my Twitter bio every month. I think this month alone, there was 8,500 people looked at my Twitter bio. And I go in and I look at those analytics. So people do spend time looking at your Twitter bio. So make sure it's populated, make sure it's filled out, but make sure there's a picture up there, no eggheads. So get a profile picture up there, a nice professional shot, and have that there. Be a thought leader within your organization. Talk about the great things that are happening, showcase developments, write, produce your own content and push that out, and be that thought leader within your industry. Don't be afraid to get creative over time and mix it up. Don't do the same things all the time. Do freshen it up. Do look for new ways. Here are some tools that I recommend that you take a look at. And again, all of these tools are available. They're going to be on the cheat sheet, so don't worry about if you miss writing them down. A great little tool that I use for scheduling my posts on social media is a platform called DrumUp. Now, it is free to connect one social media account. So let's say you're going to choose LinkedIn, for example. Well, you can go into the DrumUp platform and you can automate your posts to LinkedIn, so it will automatically schedule content going out. Now, you remember what I said, I'm not a huge fan of automating all of this up, but there's certainly no harm in automating things up to go out at the correct times. So automation serves a purpose, it plays a part. But again, this is a great way for you to maybe even push out articles, links to blog posts on your website that you want people to take a look at. You can automate those up through the DrumUp tool, and you can push them straight to your LinkedIn profile or your Twitter account. Now, you can connect it with other social media accounts, but there is a subscription in order to be able to do that. But it's a great little tool. The other great thing about this tool in particular, guys, is, and wait for it, it allows you to get content ideas. So it kind of analyzes what you're doing. It looks at your audience and it gives you ideas of what content will work. So there is a content discovery feature within this platform, which I really like, because it helps me then produce the content that I need to be producing for my audience, rather than me come up with something that may or may not be relevant or not reach anybody at all. So again, paying attention to the insights that are given to you within the platform are really useful. Google Trends is another tool that I recommend that you take a look at. You can check out what's trending on Google right now in the UK, but also what's trending worldwide. And again, dipping in and out of there to see if there's any relevance to you, your organization, your industry, you as a thought leader, and really just getting ideas. I'm not saying that, what's popping up on trending at the moment might be relevant all the time, but it is very much about getting ideas. And people always ask me, like, I just can't come up with anything. I don't know what to produce. This is where looking at the content discovery tools, this is where looking at what's trending on Twitter or what's trending on Google, for example, will start to give you an idea on the type of content and how popular it is across the platform. And if there is some sort of relevance or connection to your industry, then there might be an opportunity for you to produce your own version of that content. Buffer is another content scheduling tool as well, which will allow you to schedule your content, also offer some content analysis, also show you then how your tweets are performing, how your posts are performing, who's engaging with that content, the number of likes that it got, the number of shares that it got. So really starting to drill down into how the social media is performing for you, because that's a real important aspect of this as well. And then finally, Canva as a great way to create your social media graphics. Free, doesn't cost you any money. I've been using this tool for absolutely a number of years now. It's fantastic. And there's so many great templates in there where you can brand it up with your own branding. You can pull in your logo and you can make things a little bit more creative as well. So that's a very useful tool to take a look at as well. Twitter lists, another really valuable way to get an idea on what people are tweeting without following them. Now, people love this one because what you can do is you can set up a Twitter list. You can add people to your private Twitter list, and the person that you've added to the private Twitter list doesn't know that you've added them to the list. So if you're interested in following other organizations, if you're interested in following other people online and you don't want them to necessarily know that you're following them, because remember, if you follow them, they're going to know that you followed them. But if you create a private Twitter list and you add them to the Twitter list, you can dip into that Twitter list at any time and get a full breakdown of what that person is tweeting and what's been pushed out. It's a great way to research other Twitter accounts. And I use this mostly for following media outlets, journalists, and those types of things. So it provides me with a quick way to see what the particular journalist has pushed out over the past 24 hours. And I'm not having to follow that journalist in a sense, or that user, because maybe I don't want that person to be aware that I'm following them. So again, it's more of a covert way, a private list, but it provides a real quick way for you to get a picture on what that user or what that organization is tweeting. But you have to set it up as a protected list. Keep that in mind as well. Have a little bit of a tutorial coming up as well on how to do that in the cheat sheet. So when it comes to social media, keep in mind, guys, it's all about being relevant, being informative, being engaging, and providing educational value as much as possible. And those are the pillars of good social media. Those are the pillars of good digital communications. So always keep them at the back of your mind. It's not about the number of likes or the number of followers you have. It's about building meaningful connections and getting the voice of your organizational heard. That is the key. It's about cutting through the noise and building those meaningful connections. So how do we deal with negative social media? Receiving negative replies or responses and social media comments is a part of all of this as well. It's hard to avoid. It will happen. You always got to keep that at the back of your mind. But here's what you can do about that. Be responsive, but remember, not every post, tweet will require a response. You don't want to get caught up in responding to everything. You want to manage that as best you can. And again, try to find a way, if something is up there and has been posted, before you respond, you may want to have a conversation internally about what that response is going to be. And the idea behind that response should be trying to take that conversation offline. Don't avoid negative comments. Look, I've had my fair share of these in the past on YouTube, on all sorts of channels as well. And I don't avoid them. A lot of the times I do thank people for their feedback, even if it's negative or positive. I thank them for taking the time to send me the feedback. Sometimes the feedback, it may seem negative to me, but there's actually something in there that I can improve on. And I do take that away as well as it, but I don't internalize it. And that's really important. I don't reread it all the time. and I certainly don't internalize it. I respect that person's opinion, and then I kind of move on. Now, where it crosses over that line into harassment, then there's a different process for following that. But for the most part, if it's a negative that they haven't liked my video, they haven't liked what I said, thank them for their feedback, and I kind of move on. And what I found mostly is that kind of ends it. That kind of normally sort of stops the conversation. Be careful about feeding the trolls. Again, a major problem on all social media platforms, but Twitter, I suppose, is the one that we all sort of hear about it, but it does exist on other social media platforms as well. So when you start to feed back to these trolls, then that's where that conversation can start to take a life of its own. So do be careful about feeding back the trolls what response and what information you're giving them. It might be a case where you just block that person and you move on. And sometimes I find that to be the most effective way, or at least mute the person for 30 days. And that's one of the things I love about the features within the platforms. You do have that ability to mute people. And I've also had to mute family members on social media platforms, and that has helped me. So don't be afraid to use the mute button. And you don't have to block that person, but where they cross over that line into harassment, you would want to be blocking them, and also gathering some evidence as well and screenshotting the tweet as well. And I have a little folder on my desktop, and that's where I drop that type of content into. Keep in mind the impact on search results as well. So the more people that feed into the response, the greater the search engine result is going to be. And remember that tweets appear in Google search engine results, Facebook posts, other things that might be public can appear in the search engine results and can be directly contributed to your name as well. So you want to keep that in mind. And then watch out for the media. I'm talking about the journalists here. I'm talking about the mainstream media that are using social media to find out information. So when it comes to reputation, keep in mind that reputational risk and damage is something that exists. And it is a big concern for businesses and brands and individuals around the world. So we want to make sure that we manage that. Each post that you post online, your digital footprint grows as well. So the more that we post and we contribute online, the greater our digital footprint will go. So it is important to monitor what's in the search engines. So if you've never done it before, go across to Google, do a quick search engine search on your name, your organization, and see what pops up. 75% of people never scroll past the first page of Google. So really what you want to be focusing on is owning the search engine results on page 1 of Google. The best way to do that is to push out regular content. The best way to do that is ensure that your website is regularly updated and optimized, and that you're pushing content through your blog and also through your social media platform. But it doesn't end there. We also have users who create their own content. And this could be employees, this could be customers, this could be stakeholders. And that's what's known as user-generated content. That unfortunately impacts our search engine results. And I have no control really over what somebody else writes on their own personal blog about Wayne Denner. And I've had some reviews of where people have left me reviews on their own blog. But again, being active on the search engine as well and being visible helps you get notified if there's something out there that maybe you're not aware of. So 2 free tools to take a look at are Google Alerts and TalkWalker. And this is where you can set up an alert. If something appears on the search engine about little old me, I get an email from Google. I get an email, I get a notification. And this is great, particularly for the media guys, where they might write stories, they might write, or they might use a quote, which could be an outdated quote. If you're monitoring your organization's name and your own name using TalkWalker in particular is a very useful tool, you will get an email as soon as that appears in the search engines. It's free, doesn't cost you any money, but absolutely worthwhile taking a look at. So protecting your own reputation, the reputation of your organization, but also keeping in mind protecting your own accounts and making sure that you're practicing what I call good digital hygiene. Now, 65% of people that are watching this video today use the same one password everywhere. Now, if I could see people on screen, I know there's people going, that's me. Yeah, I use the same password everywhere. I've got that one password that I recycle, that I just change the numbers about, and that does me for everything. Please don't do that anymore. That is not practicing good digital hygiene. You want to protect yourself, but also protect your organization. Data breaches are happening all the time. Account takeovers are increasing. SIM swaps are also something that we have to contend with. And that's what happened. Jack Dorsey from Twitter, and identity theft is up 75% because of all the public information that's available online. So you want to protect your accounts. So here's what you can do. Set up the two-step verification across all of your accounts: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is you use. Go into your security settings and make sure that the two-factor authentication is set up on your account. Use a password manager, because that will keep all of your passwords securely stored on a password manager in your device. Check a website called Have I Been Pwned to see if your email address has ever been involved in a data breach. That is your homework today, because the likelihood that your email address probably already has been involved in a data breach and you're not aware of this, you want to be, okay? But they also have a feature on their website where you can sign up to get a notification if your email ever appears in an upcoming data breach. 3 days ago, I got a notification from them to say a website that I use has just been involved in a data breach. And it showed me all of the information which was compromised. Pretty quickly, I was able to go in, change my password, and move on with my life. So again, if I wasn't monitoring that, I wouldn't have been aware of it, okay? So 2 tools that are going to help with this, guys. LastPass. If you're ever using any public Wi-Fi, please use a VPN, particularly if you're transferring sensitive nature over the network. Everyone loves free Wi-Fi, but free Wi-Fi is not secure. Always layer that up with a VPN. If you're looking for a VPN that doesn't cost you any money, take a look at Proton VPN. It's a good VPN that's available out there, but it will ensure that a second layer of security is added to your account, particularly when you're transferring any information over the network. It will encrypt that data, particularly if you're going to be entering sensitive information such as date of births, bank account information, passwords, PIN numbers, those types of things. It's good to have the VPN set up. So that's what I call practicing really good digital hygiene. And all of this is connected. So in summary, in our digital world, social media and digital communications are an effective way to reach and engage with people. There's no doubt about it. They provide a smarter way for you to show the human side of your organization and become a thought leader within. Simply posting the odd post to social media is not going to be enough. It is about engagement, building real relationships, and also looking for a way to drive engagement. That's what's really important. Used correctly, it allows you, your organization, to build your own media channel and shape the narrative. And there is no better person than you to do that. You can shape the narrative for your organization by using social media effectively. Now, before we sum up, is there any questions that people would like to ask? I'm going to flick back into the room now and see what questions has popped up in the chat, if we have any, and take any questions from anybody who would like to ask questions based on what we covered this afternoon.
Well, Wayne, quiet on the chat so far, people, so feel free to start feeding in any questions or comments, but I want to, on behalf of everyone, Wayne, to thank you for a really comprehensive and thought-provoking presentation and some very useful myth-busting slides there for us, and some important questions that we all need to think about for our own organizations, and some very useful and important homework there at the end for I think everyone. At this stage, I would like to turn first to our chair, David Stirling. Safe to say, I think that David was one of Northern Ireland's most high-profile public servants over the last 4 or 5 years, and certainly engaged highly with us all over social media in that period. And I know, David, that you'll have some reflections on Wayne's presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Anne, and thanks, Wayne. Thanks a lot. That was really, really good. Some excellent advice there, particularly like the be real and authentic advice. But your concluding remarks about security as well, I think think we all need to take that away. And indeed, we have, as you said, we've got homework to do today now on that, because I think we're all probably much more exposed than we maybe imagine. I'm sort of interested in the impact this has on the individual. And again, you give us a lot of good advice about how to deal with the negativity. And there's no doubt, you know, if you're on social media, and I don't think you can avoid it now, you will get the negative stuff, even when you don't expect it. Like actually, there was during the lockdown, on my personal Twitter account, we had got a meal from a local restaurant, one of the carryout arrangements, and they had said to us, you know, on their menu sheet, oh, by the way, please show photographs of our dishes to help, you know, promote what we're doing, which I did, and I got some nice comments back. But then there was one in the middle which said, "You're a pretentious prat. None of us can afford to do that." You know, so, you know, it was the sort of thing where I just thought, yeah, possibly so, but there is definitely a thing there that you will get negative stuff. And I remember Rory Best talking about when he was captain of the Ireland rugby team, he could get 100 tweets after a match, and 98 would be complimentary and 2 would be negative. And he would say, "You remember the negative." And that was my experience as head of the civil service. You tended to remember the negative. Now, with the passage of time, you become better at dealing with that. But I still think that as leaders, we have to recognize that as we encourage our people to use social media, that we need to support them when they do deal with the negative stuff. And I suppose my question there, Wayne, is how can you ensure a bit of consistency across your organization? Because some people are a real natural for this stuff. They can get their message across, they can educate, and they can do it very naturally and very authentically. Other people are more uncomfortable with it. So if you're trying to create that sort of brand image, how can you try and ensure that there is some consistency in the way in which the leaders in the organization use social media?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're absolutely right, David, with the negative tweets and the negative feedback. And those are the ones that you do ultimately end up focusing on, because they can be cutting in some cases. And I've experienced bits and pieces of that as well. But I think what's really important, and this was said to me many moons ago, the whole aspect of social media is that, and this sort of resonated really well with me, is that you control the social media, not the other way around. So what I found to be super helpful for me, and again, this is slightly different if you're somebody like Rory Best, because you're going to have a wider audience of people following you than, say, somebody like me would have, or indeed some people who are tuned in today. But what I think is really important is not internalizing it first and foremost. And I think that's hard to do sometimes, but not internalizing it is really important. And also what I've tended to do, if some of those things happen from time to time, is what I've tended to do is hide those particular comments so that I'm not revisiting them again and again on the particular profile when I go back in to use it. Now, you can do that on various platforms, and that's also really helped me as well. But I was never a natural at this, believe it or not. And I know it's probably hard to sort of see, but I wasn't actually a natural at putting myself out there. And what I decided to do was start really small, build a small community of people that really sort of got what it is I did, and grow it out from there, as opposed to trying to come out and try to attract everybody in, because that's where I felt that it could become most overwhelming and most likely go wrong. And that has really helped me. But I think to add to that, what's really important is the training and the support within the organization for people. I think training is so important. And really looking at progression across that as well. There are some people that are going to get this really good and do it really well. I'm sure there's some people who are watching this today who are following beauty bloggers and fashion bloggers and foodies and all those types of things, and might even be doing their own thing and doing it really well. So there's a great opportunity to learn from others, and that's the great thing about it. So I would encourage people who maybe want to get a little bit more help and support to reach out and ask questions. Bounce content off other people before you push it out there. That's always a great way. Most of the time I get somebody to look over the videos that I'm just about to put out there to make sure that they sound right and they look right, and I don't look like a bumbling idiot. And sometimes that happens, believe it or not. Like, it just doesn't come across right, and it may have to be reshot. So again, bouncing it off a close inner community of people is really important. But just get yourself out there, surround yourself with like-minded people who believe in what it is you do, have a little bit further training within the organization if that's possible, and that will really help build people's confidence of getting in front of the camera or putting themselves out there. But again, I would implore you to go back and look at some of my older stuff to see where I started, and that's the great thing about leaving that stuff up there. If you listen to episode 1 of my podcast, not good. Episode 2, not good. Episode 3, not good. Episode 55 is actually not bad. And somebody from a well-known media organization said to me recently, that's really good. Do you do that yourself? And I do. So progression, I'm able to look back at those things and see the progression. So go and look at those YouTube videos of me from days gone by 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. But what you will see is confidence building. And the more you do it, the more confidence that you build.
Thanks, Wayne, for that. I know Nicole Lappin would like to come in with a question. Nicole, if we could go to you next.
And thank you very much. And Wayne, thank you so much. I in particular was scribbling down some of the tools that you have identified that we can look at that I certainly hadn't come across before. And I was very struck that I think the tenor of your presentation was very much about how we can create a narrative for our organisations. I chair the Ambulance Service Board and I'm also the Chief Commissioner of the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland. I'm just wondering if you can say something, Wayne, about where, if in through traditional media there is a negative story suddenly appears, how would you suggest an organisation might want to address that through social media so that the narrative hasn't appeared before on the organisation's social media platform? It's being discussed out there through print, radio, television. To what extent then do you, especially if you're an organisation that hasn't engaged a lot on social media, would you actually pick that up through your social media presence if you have one, please?
No, that's a good question. I think I would actually roll right back, Nicole, to starting to talk about all of the good news stories that obviously exists within the organization. And that's where I think is really key. The more good news stories you're pushing out, the more impact they're going to have. And there's no doubt, I work in a space where there's a lot of negativity, particularly around social media platforms and things going wrong. And I could very easily talk all day long about the negative aspects of social media and the things that happen online. But what I try to do is put my own spin on it, my own narrative on it, so that I'm showcasing the positives that exist there as well. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not perfect. Social media is not perfect. Nobody is, in fact. And there are going to be things that happen along the way that by me looking at ways to produce that positive aspect, and this is where I was sort of touching on this earlier on in it, look back at all the good news stories that are happening within your organization and document them. That's the key point today. Document, okay? There are good news stories happening all the time, and the problem is they go undocumented. If you see something that's happening within your organization that you think it's a good news story, whether you use it or not is forget about that, but document it at that time. Pull out your phone, take a video of it, capture an image and store it somewhere because you may need it at a later date. And what you're starting to do is you're starting to build up a library of content that you can start to push through the social media channel. And the more of that good news that you're pushing, the more impact it's going to have. So when something happens, like you've just mentioned, where there is a negative story being discussed in other forms of media, you're trying to counteract that with your good news stories that you've been constantly pushing through your social media channels, which have been resonating with your audience as well. And the more of that you do, the better you're going to be at of sort of dampening that negativity that's circulating around that story. Because you have to keep in mind that if you're not active on the platform, you're giving the upper hand to the other party. You're giving the upper hand to them to spin the story whatever way they want. And mainstream media, for the most part, and hope nobody takes offense to this, is very good at that. I mean, we have lots of very good people in media across NI in the UK that are very good at spinning those stories. And I think from an organizational point of view, where we really struggle is we don't have enough content out there to push back onto that. So I would say to you, in short, start to document all of the good news stories that are happening within that organization and start to push more of those out as well. And when something like that happens, I would be referring people back to the good news stories off the back of that. So I'd be pushing back with my good news stories. off the back of what they're trying to push out as a negative spin. Now, where possible, you may want to address that as well. And I would say don't avoid that. Find a way to maybe join that conversation and try to shape that narrative a little bit more to your advantage.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne, for that. And thanks, Robert Kidd, who I think I could sum up your contribution there to say that the public sector organisations can be sitting ducks occasionally for some social media challenges. Melanie McVeigh has also raised a really interesting question, Wayne, as to who you found to be most effective on social media and what is it that makes them so engaging. And Anne Williamson has asked if you think it would be a good idea to push out more podcasts on social media to explain what we as the public sector do. So we're right on time, Wayne. Probably a quick minute or two to sum up on those if possible.
So Anne's question, absolutely great question. And this is something we didn't touch on. Keep in mind that not everybody likes to read. And that's really important when you're producing content. A lot of organizations, particularly in the public sector, and I'm not trying to point the finger here, it's purely an observation. A lot of what I see coming out is it's written content, it's on a PDF. It's really not effective for me as the end user consuming that content. So think of how your audience learns. And remember the whole different learning styles. Some people learn by reading, some people learn by watching, and some people learn by listening, okay? So Anne's point on podcast is really relevant because that provides an opportunity for you to produce a piece of content that is for those people who like to listen. And keep in mind as well, more and more people are listening to things like Spotify now. There's been a huge growth in podcasts over the past 12 to 18 months, which we haven't seen before. So that tells me one thing, that people are actually seeking out content in different formats. So it's up to the organization then to ensure that you're producing content that meets the needs of the learner, whether they want to read the content, whether they want to listen to it in audio format, or they want to watch it like we're doing today. So what I try to do from that point of view is produce 3 types of content. A content that's written in a blog post or a tweet. I produce an audio podcast regularly, or I produce audio tweets. You already heard me mention that earlier on. Or in some cases, I'm producing video content that people can watch and listen to at the same time. That's a great opportunity for businesses to do better, I think, across all industries, but also I think huge potential there. I receive a lot of correspondence from public sector organizations. I'm on various mailing lists. A lot of it is written, very little of it is visual. I think more use of infographics, definitely more use of podcasts, and more use of video. Definitely video. If video should be on your strategy already, but please make sure that it's on your strategy for 2021. Definitely more video content. Melanie's comment there. Who do I think is doing it really well? I've seen a couple of examples of organizations that are doing it really well. I did see a great example of the British Heart Foundation last year, I think, or the year before, who did a really good comms piece online on CPR and the importance of, knowing how to administer their CPR. And it was pushed very much through social media, on Twitter in particular, and also on Facebook, where it was showing people what to do in the event of somebody having a cardiac arrest. Now, the great thing about it was all video and animated driven. So it was really effective. You could watch it, you could consume it, and you could understand the message in behind it. And I thought that was really well executed. I think there's a huge opportunity across everybody who's here today to take it to the next level. And I think if you go back to the point that I already mentioned about making sure that your content is engaging, is informative, is inspiring, and is educational. Every time you're pushing out a piece of content, try to tap into those 4 pillars. And also make sure that the content itself is produced in a way that's easy for your end audience to understand. It's not too long-winded, it's not too short, but it's got that sweet spot that's getting your message across and allowing you to shape that narrative.
Great. Thank you, Wayne. And I'm conscious that we're a few minutes over our allotted time, and I don't want to hold people back. We have a really interesting contribution there from Ken Mack just at the end of the chat around the responsibilities on social media companies in relation to incorrect or offensive posts. And Wayne, if I could ask you to pick that one up in the cheat sheet later on to just give our guests some guidance on how to follow up those issues. Very important, I think, for all public sector organisations. Thanks, Ken. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. A huge thank you, Wayne. And as I say, the cheat sheet will come along to everyone later on this afternoon. We'll also circulate Wayne's contact details if anyone wants to follow up with him individually. And a huge thank you to everyone for coming along this morning and for the engagement. It's been a really useful session for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tom.
Well done. And that's our Ross there, not on video.
That was great, guys. Thank
There
you.
we are. Yeah, no, that was really good. Always just takes a wee minute to get the questions going, but of course
Oh,
came
great.
flooding in then at the end.
No, there's some great questions there. So I'll make sure we'll refer to most of them again, actually, in the cheat sheet. That's good. That's why I didn't want to circulate that, because we got
Yes, yeah, no, really good to be able to pick it up like that. I think we can cut and paste that chat just to make sure.
Yeah,
we
I'll do that now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great, Wayne. You barely drew breath the whole way through. Fantastic.
That was good. No, that was good. I was trying to keep it on time. And there's
Yeah.
always lots of stuff in there, and you're trying to but the great thing about that is it gives a real good overview there on what to be mindful of and how to, and even on the digital hygiene things as well, as David
Yeah.
referred to.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
that's some good stuff in relation to all of that. So that's very
Great.
valuable in itself and very timely.
Yeah, yeah. No, very good. Delighted.
No,
And
that
we've
was
got
great.
get everyone away off for their lunch now.
Yeah, did well.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Nothing came down on top of me.
No, nothing fell over, and everybody's connections stayed on. And Ross, poor Ross is just back off sick leave. How are you feeling?
Getting there.
Muddling through,
Actually
muddling
woke up
through.
this morning with a bit more swelling on the side, so
Not great.
still hasn't gone away.
Ross has been fighting with his dentist for the last while, so it's not fun.
I feel for people now who can't get that stuff sorted. That's
Yeah. But hopefully you're at the right end of it, Ross. So listen, Wayne, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
That was brilliant. Really
Well,
good.
keep in touch.
We will.
I'll get that over to you guys this afternoon. Now I'll just tidy up what I need to put into it, and then I'll put
Fantastic.
contact details on it as well, and then anybody can reach out and ask further questions.
Great. Brilliant.
Super.
Thanks a million. Great
Super.
session.
Well, listen,
All
Thanks
right.
so much.
thanks as always, guys.
All the
Take
Take
best.
care.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.